The massive space station hung in the darkness like a metal city. Ships from across the galaxy surrounded it, their hulls gleaming under the distant stars. Inside the station's great hall, representatives from dozens of alien species gathered. Around a circular table that stretched for hundreds of meters, Ambassador Lee Dong-woo sat alone at the human section. His dark suit looked plain next to the colorful robes and strange armor worn by the aliens around him. He kept his hands folded on the table and his face calm, even though he knew this meeting would decide the future of all humanity. At the center of the hall stood Vexatar, the leader of the hegemony. His blue skin was covered in silver markings that showed his high rank. When he spoke, his voice boomed through speakers that translated his words into hundreds of languages. "We are here today to discuss the human problem," Vexatar announced. His four eyes focused on Lee Dong-woo with obvious dislike. "For too long, we have watched these creatures spread across the galaxy like a disease. They take worlds without asking. They build colonies where they do not belong. And worst of all, their technology grows stronger every day." Murmurs of agreement came from many of the alien delegates. Lee noticed that some species nodded their heads while others made clicking sounds or flashed colored lights on their bodies. All of these were ways of showing they agreed with Vexatar. "The humans are dangerous," continued a delegate with tentacles for arms. "My scouts report they have developed new weapons, ships that move faster than anything we have seen. They breed too quickly," added another alien whose voice sounded like grinding metal. "Soon they will outnumber all of us combined." Lee Dong-woo listened to the accusations without speaking. He had expected this. Earth's rapid expansion had worried many alien governments. In just 50 years, humans had gone from a single planet to having colonies in 12-star systems. Other species had taken centuries to achieve the same growth. Vexatar raised one of his four arms for silence. "The Galactic Council has made a decision. Humanity must prove they deserve to exist among us. If they cannot, then they will be contained to their home system forever. If they refuse our test, then they will be destroyed." The hall fell silent. Even the constant hum of the station's air recyclers seemed to grow quieter. Lee felt his heart beating faster, but he kept his expression neutral. "What kind of test?" Lee asked, his voice steady. Vexatar smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Single combat. Your species will send one champion to face our greatest warrior. If your champion wins, humanity will be granted full membership in the Galactic Council. If your champion loses, your people will never leave their solar system again." "And if we refuse?" Lee asked. "Then the combined fleets of the hegemony will turn Earth into space dust," Vexatar replied coldly. Many of the alien delegates made sounds of approval. They seemed to enjoy the idea of giving humans an impossible choice. Lee noticed that not all of them looked happy about it, though. A few species sat quietly, their representatives looking uncomfortable. One of these was Crixnall, a tall alien with gray skin and large, intelligent eyes. He had always been fair to humans in past meetings. Now he leaned forward slightly and spoke in a gentle voice. "Perhaps there could be another way," Crixnall suggested. "The humans have shown remarkable creativity. Maybe we could find a test that does not involve violence." Vexatar turned his glare on Crixnall. "The decision has been made. Combat is the only way to prove strength. The humans claim to be strong, so let them prove it." "What are the rules of this combat?" Lee asked. "Simple," Vexatar replied. "Each side sends one vessel with one crew. They fight until one is destroyed or surrenders. The battle will take place in neutral space, witnessed by representatives from all council members." Lee thought carefully. He knew that the hegemony had the most powerful military in the galaxy. Their champion would certainly be in the strongest ship available, with the best weapons and shields. Any normal human ship would be destroyed in seconds. But Lee also knew something the aliens did not. For months, Earth's best scientists and engineers had been working on a secret project. If it worked, humanity might have a chance. If it failed, then at least they would go down fighting. "How long do we have to prepare?" Lee asked. 30 standard days, Vexatar announced. "The combat will take place in the Rigel system, in the asteroid field near the 4th planet. Our champion will be waiting." Lee stood up slowly. Every alien, eye in the hall, focused on him. He could feel their expectations, their certainty that humanity would either refuse the challenge or be easily defeated. "On behalf of Earth and all human colonies," Lee said clearly, "I accept your challenge." A wave of surprise rippled through the hall. Many aliens had expected humans to beg for mercy or try to negotiate different terms. Instead, their ambassador had accepted immediately, without even consulting his government. Vextar's expression showed confusion for just a moment before returning to its usual arrogance. "Excellent. In 30 days we will see what human courage is truly worth." As the meeting ended, delegates began filing out of the hall. Some stopped to speak with each other in small groups, no doubt discussing what they had just witnessed. Lee gathered his few papers and prepared to leave. "Ambassador," a quiet voice called. Lee turned to see Crixnall approaching. The tall alien looked around to make sure no one was watching before speaking in a low voice. "I hope you know what you are doing," Crixnall said. "The hegemony's champion has never been defeated. War Prime Thokran has destroyed over 200 enemy ships in single combat." "Thank you for the warning," Lee replied calmly. "Is there really nothing I can do to change this?" Crixnall asked. "My people respect humans. We do not want to see you destroyed." Lee smiled for the first time since the meeting began. "I appreciate your concern, my friend. But sometimes the best way to prove you belong is to show everyone something they have never seen before." Crixnall looked puzzled by this answer, but Lee did not explain further. Instead, he bowed politely and walked toward the exit. As Lee's shuttle departed from the station, he activated a secure communication channel to Earth. Within moments, the face of Admiral Park Min-jung appeared on his screen. "How did it go?" the Admiral asked. "As expected," Lee replied. "They want single combat in 30 days. Their champion is someone called War Prime Thokran." Admiral Park nodded grimly. "We know of him. His ship carries enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Is the project ready?" Lee asked. "Dr. Choi and her team are making final preparations now." "But Lee, you know this is completely untested. We have no idea if it will actually work in combat." Lee looked out at the stars streaming past his shuttle. Somewhere out there, War Prime Thokran was preparing for what he thought would be an easy victory. The entire Galactic Council expected to watch humanity's humiliation and defeat. "It will work," Lee said with quiet confidence. "It has to work, because if it does not, then everything we have built, everything we have dreamed of, will end in 30 days. The communication ended, leaving Lee alone with his thoughts as his shuttle began the long journey back to Earth. Behind him, the space station grew smaller until it was just another point of light among the stars. In 30 days, the galaxy would learn what happened when you underestimated humanity. The asteroid field near Rigel looked like a graveyard of broken rocks floating in space. Some asteroids were as small as houses, while others were bigger than cities. Between them, hundreds of alien warships had taken positions to watch the coming battle. Fleet Commander Zulkar stood on the bridge of his massive dreadnought, watching the preparations through the main view screen. Ships from every major species in the galaxy had come to witness what everyone expected to be humanity's final defeat. The hegemony's military might was on full display, with their largest battleships forming a protective ring around the combat zone. "Status report," Zulkar commanded. "All witness ships are in position," his tactical officer replied. "The combat zone has been cleared of all debris larger than 2 meters. Sensor arrays are active and recording." Zulkar nodded with satisfaction. This would be a lesson that every species in the galaxy would remember. When the hegemony said something would happen, it happened exactly as promised. At the center of the combat zone waited War Prime Thokran's ship, the Bone Crusher. The vessel was a masterpiece of military engineering, nearly 2 kilometers long and bristling with the most advanced weapons the hegemony could build. Its black hull was covered in spikes and sharp angles designed to strike fear into enemies. Energy barriers shimmered around it like blue fire, protecting it from any attack. Inside the Bone Crusher, War Prime Thokran sat in his command chair like a king on his throne. His massive body was covered in ritual scars from previous battles, each one marking a victory over his enemies. His 4 arms rested on the chair's controls, ready to unleash destruction on whoever was foolish enough to challenge him. "Any sign of the human ship?" he asked his crew. "No, War Prime," his sensor operator replied. We have detected no human vessels in this system. Thokran laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. Perhaps they have decided not to come. Perhaps they finally understand that they cannot win against the hegemony's might. On the hegemony command ship, Zulkar was beginning to think the same thing. The deadline was only minutes away, and long-range sensors showed no approaching ships from the direction of human space. Maybe they are smarter than we thought, suggested his second-in-command. Maybe they realized this was suicide and decided to accept containment instead. But Zulkar was not convinced. He had studied human military records. They were stubborn creatures who rarely backed down from a fight, even when the odds were impossible. Something felt wrong about their absence. With only 60 seconds remaining until the deadline, space suddenly rippled near the edge of the combat zone. A single ship dropped out of hyperspace, its engines glowing as it slowed from faster-than-light speed. Every sensor in the fleet immediately focused on the newcomer. What they saw made many of the alien observers laugh out loud. The human ship looked like something that should have been scrapped decades ago. It was roughly the size of a standard cargo hauler, with a battered gray hull covered in dents and scorch marks. One of its engine nacelles looked like it had been repaired with spare parts from completely different ships. There were no visible weapons, no energy shields, and no armor plating. "That is their champion?" Zulkar asked in disbelief. "It looks like a garbage scow." On other ships throughout the fleet, similar reactions were occurring. Alien commanders who had expected to see humanity's most powerful warship instead found themselves staring at what appeared to be an old freighter that had seen too many years of hard use. The human vessel transmitted its identification. UES Perseverance. Captain Kim Jae-ho commanding. "Perseverance requests permission to enter the combat zone," came a calm human voice over the communication channels. War Prime Thokran could hardly contain his amusement. "This is what humanity sends to face me? A cargo ship with a crew of probably no more than 20? His tactical officer was scanning the human vessel with every sensor available. "War Prime, I am reading minimal energy output. Their shields are so weak our sensors can barely detect them. No visible weapons of any kind." "What about their crew?" Thokran asked. "Difficult to determine, War Prime. The ship's hull seems to be interfering with our biological scanners. But based on the ship's size, there cannot be more than 30 humans aboard." Thokran stood up from his command chair, his full 3-meter height making him an imposing figure. "This is almost insulting. Did they think sending an unarmed freighter would make us take pity on them?" On the bridge of the Perseverance, Captain Kim Jae-ho sat calmly in his chair. His uniform was simple and clean, without the elaborate decorations that many alien commanders preferred. Around him, his small crew went about their duties with quiet efficiency. "Navigation, take us to the center of the combat zone," Kim ordered. "Yes, Captain," replied Navigation Officer Han Min-seok, a young man whose hands moved smoothly over controls that looked surprisingly advanced for such an old ship. Chief Engineer Park So-young looked up from her station. "All systems are ready, Captain. We can begin whenever you give the word." Kim nodded and opened a communication channel to the hegemony fleet. "This is Captain Kim of the Perseverance. We are ready to begin the trial." Zulkar's voice came back. "Immediately." "Human Captain, are you certain this is your champion vessel? We were expecting something more substantial." "This is our ship," Kim replied simply. "We are ready." There was a pause before Zulkar responded. "Very well. War Prime Thokran, you may begin combat at your discretion. All witness ships will record the engagement for the Galactic Council." Inside the Bone Crusher, Thokran was almost disappointed. He had hoped for a real challenge, something that would test his skills and add glory to his reputation. Instead, he would be remembered for destroying what looked like an unarmed transport ship. "Weapons, charge all primary batteries," he commanded. "Let us end this quickly." "All weapons charged and ready, War Prime," his weapons officer reported. "Begin attack," Thokran ordered. The Bone Crusher surged forward, its massive engines pushing it toward the small human ship. Energy cannons began charging with a deep humming sound that vibrated through the ship's hull. Missile tubes loaded with the most destructive warheads the hegemony possessed. Watching from their observation positions, The alien fleets prepared to witness what they thought would be the shortest battle in galactic history. Some commanders were already composing reports about humanity's foolish bravery and inevitable defeat. But on the bridge of the Perseverance, Captain Kim remained perfectly calm. He watched the approaching hegemony warship without any sign of fear or concern. "Chief, are you ready?" he asked quietly. Park So-young smiled. "All systems are green, Captain. Let's show them what humanity can really do." Kim nodded and spoke a single word that would change everything the aliens thought they knew about human technology. "Activate." Suddenly, the Perseverance began to change. The battered hull started glowing with a soft blue light. The ship's energy signature, which had been almost undetectable moments before, suddenly spiked to levels that made every sensor in the fleet scream warnings. War Prime Thokran stopped his advance, confusion replacing his earlier confidence. "What is happening? What are they doing?" His sensor operator's voice was filled with disbelief. "War Prime, their power output just increased by 10,000%. I am reading energy patterns I have never seen before." The Perseverance began to move in ways that should have been impossible for any ship. It accelerated instantly to speeds that should have torn its hull apart, then stopped just as suddenly, without any sign of inertial stress. It spun on its axis while moving forward, defying every law of physics that the aliens understood. "Open fire," Thokran commanded, panic creeping into his voice for the first time in decades. The Bone Crusher unleashed its full arsenal. Energy beams that could destroy cities lanced out toward the human ship. Missiles that could crack planets streaked through, space on pillars of fire. But when the weapons reached where the Perseverance had been, they found only empty space. The human ship was gone. War Prime Thokran stared at his view screen in shock. His most powerful weapons had struck empty space where the human ship should have been. The Perseverance had simply vanished, as if it had never existed at all. "Sensor report," he bellowed at his crew. "War Prime, I am reading multiple contacts," his sensor operator replied, his voice shaking. "The human ship appears to be in 7 different locations at once." "That is impossible," Thokran roared. "No ship can be in multiple places." But the sensors did not lie. The Perseverance flickered in and out of existence around the Bone Crusher, appearing for brief moments before vanishing again. Each time it appeared, it was in a different position, moving in patterns that made no sense. On the bridge of the Perseverance, Captain Kim Jae-ho watched the confused alien warship with calm satisfaction. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with smooth precision. "Navigation! Take us through the next sequence," Kim ordered. Han Min-seok's hands danced over his controls. To any observer, they would have looked like normal ship controls, but they were connected to something far more advanced than any alien could imagine. "Phase shift complete, Captain," Han reported. "We are now existing in multiple dimensional states simultaneously." Chief Engineer Park So-young monitored her readings carefully. "Quantum matrix is stable, energy levels at optimal. We can maintain this state for approximately 4 hours." Kim nodded. "More than enough time. Communications open a channel to the hegemony ship." The communication went out on all frequencies, reaching not just the Bone Crusher but every ship in the watching fleet. Kim's voice was calm and professional, as if he was discussing the weather instead of engaged in mortal combat. "War Prime Thokran, this is Captain Kim. Your weapons cannot hit what exists between dimensions. Would you like to surrender now?" Thokran's response came as a roar of fury that made his communication equipment crackle. "Never! I will tear your ship apart with my bare hands if necessary." The Bone Crusher began firing wildly in all directions, trying to hit the flickering human ship. Energy beams crisscrossed the combat zone like deadly fireworks. Missiles exploded against asteroids and empty space, sending debris flying in all directions. Watching from the command ship, Fleet Commander Zulkar tried to understand what he was seeing. His best scientists and tactical officers were analyzing the sensor data, but none of them could explain how the human ship was moving. "Could it be some kind of cloaking technology?" suggested his science officer. "No," Zulkar replied grimly. "Cloaking makes you invisible, but sensors can still detect mass and energy. This ship is actually disappearing from our reality and then coming back." "That should be impossible," his science officer said weakly. "Apparently the humans disagree," Zulkar muttered. Throughout the alien fleet, similar conversations were taking place. Species that had considered themselves masters of technology were confronted with something completely beyond their understanding. On a ship belonging to the Syndicate, Science Officer Keelan frantically ran calculations on his quantum computers. As one of the galaxy's leading experts on dimensional physics, he was the first to begin understanding what the humans had accomplished. "By the ancient stars," he whispered to himself. "They have learned to exist in multiple dimensional phases at once. But that would require a level of quantum control that we thought was impossible." The battle continued, but it was becoming clear that it was not really a battle at all. The Bone Crusher fired thousands of shots, but none of them hit their target. The Perseverance seemed to dance between dimensions, appearing just long enough to be seen before vanishing again. Then something new happened. The human ship appeared directly in front of the Bone Crusher, close enough that Thakran could see details of its hull through his view screen. For a moment, both ships hung motionless in space. "Now I have you!" Thakran screamed and fired every weapon he had. But just as the energy beams reached the Perseverance, the human ship did something that made every alien observer question their understanding of reality. It opened. The ship's hull separated like flower petals, revealing something inside that defied description. Where there should have been corridors and crew quarters, there was instead a swirling mass of energy and light. Patterns moved within the energy that looked almost like neural networks, but on a scale far larger than any biological brain. The hegemony weapons passed harmlessly through the opened ship, as if they were firing at a hologram. Then the Perseverance closed itself and vanished again. "What was that?" Thakran asked, his voice now showing genuine fear. "What are they?" His science officer was studying the sensor readings from that brief moment when the human ship had opened. "War Prime, I am detecting quantum-level activity consistent with consciousness." "What do you mean, consciousness?" "The energy patterns inside their ship match the neural activity of a living brain, but magnified beyond anything we have ever seen. It is as if the ship itself is thinking." Thakran felt cold fear creeping up his spine. In all his years of combat, he had never faced anything like this. Ships were machines, tools to be used by their crews. They did not think for themselves. The Perseverance appeared again, this time behind the Bone Crusher. Kim's voice came over the communications again, still perfectly calm. "War Prime, you are using weapons designed to destroy matter. We are no longer entirely matter. Your tactics must change if you wish to continue this fight." "What are you?" Thakran demanded. "We are what humanity becomes when we are pushed to our limits," Kim replied. "We are the next step in evolution." Throughout the watching fleet, alien commanders were coming to the same terrifying realization. The humans had not sent a ship to fight their champion. They had sent something entirely new, something that challenged every assumption about life, consciousness, and technology. Dr. Choi Yun-ji's voice came over the Perseverance's internal communications from her position deep within the ship's quantum matrix. "Captain, all crew consciousness transfers are stable. We can maintain cohesion indefinitely." "Understood, Doctor," Kim replied. "Engineering, are you ready for the next phase?" Park So-young smiled from her position within the energy matrix that had once been the ship's engine room. "Ready, Captain. Let's show them what we can really do." The Perseverance began to change again. This time, instead of flickering between dimensions, it started to multiply. One ship became 2, then 4, then 8. Each new ship was identical to the original, with the same crew consciousness distributed across all of them. "Impossible," breathed Zulkar from his observation ship. "One ship cannot become many." But the sensor readings confirmed what their eyes were seeing. 8 identical human ships now surrounded the Bone Crusher, moving in perfect coordination. Each one carried the full knowledge and experience of the original crew. War Prime Thakran found himself surrounded by an enemy that defied every rule of warfare he had ever learned. His ship, designed to be the ultimate weapon, was suddenly powerless against opponents that existed beyond the normal laws of physics. "All ships, open fire!" he ordered desperately. The Bone Crusher unleashed everything it had at the surrounding human vessels, but each shot passed harmlessly through its targets, striking only empty space or distant asteroids. The 8 versions of the Perseverance began to move in a complex pattern around the hegemony ship. They were not attacking, simply demonstrating their complete mastery of the battlefield. Kim's voice came from all 8 ships simultaneously, creating an eerie chorus that reached every vessel in the fleet. "We could destroy you easily, War Prime Thokran. But that is not why we are here. We are here to show the galaxy that humanity has found a new way to exist, a way that makes old forms of warfare meaningless." The demonstration continued for several more minutes, with the human ships performing maneuvers that should have been impossible. They passed through solid asteroids, moved faster than light without entering hyperspace, and demonstrated control over fundamental forces that alien science barely understood. Finally, the 8 ships converged back into one. The Perseverance appeared in its original form, floating peacefully in the center of the combat zone. "The demonstration is complete," Kim announced. "War Prime Thokran, do you yield?" For the first time in his long career, the greatest warrior of the hegemony found himself facing an opponent he could not defeat through force. The humans had not just brought a better weapon to the fight. They had evolved beyond the need for weapons at all. The galaxy watched and waited for his answer. Science Officer Keelan worked frantically at his station aboard the Syndicate observation ship. His quantum computers processed the data from the human vessel at incredible speed, but the results made no sense according to everything he knew about physics and biology. "Impossible," he muttered for the 10th time in as many minutes. "The energy patterns are completely stable, but they should collapse instantly under normal conditions." His captain, a tall being with silver skin and multiple eyes, leaned over his shoulder. "What exactly are you detecting, Keelan?" "Captain Vexra, the human ship appears to contain a quantum consciousness matrix. Think of it as a digital brain, but one that exists in multiple dimensions at once. The consciousness patterns I am reading suggest not just one mind, but several working together as a single entity." "You mean the crew has uploaded their minds into their ship's computer?" Keelan shook his head. "No, Captain. It is far more advanced than that. They have not simply copied their minds, they have transcended their physical forms entirely while maintaining their individual personalities and memories. The ship is not just carrying their consciousness. It has become their consciousness." Meanwhile, on the Hegemony command ship, Fleet Commander Zulkar was receiving similar reports from his own science teams. But unlike Keelan, who spoke with wonder, Zulkar's scientists were filled with fear. "Commander, if the humans have truly achieved this level of consciousness transfer, then they have solved the fundamental problem of mortality," his chief scientist reported. "They can exist indefinitely without physical bodies, and they can apparently create new physical forms at will." Zulkar stared at the peaceful-looking human ship floating in the center of the combat zone. "What does this mean for our military capabilities?" "It means, Commander, that conventional warfare is useless against them. You cannot kill someone who no longer has a physical body to destroy. You cannot capture someone who can exist in multiple places at once. And you cannot defeat someone who can learn and adapt at the speed of thought." In the combat zone, War Prime Thokran was coming to the same terrible realization. His tactical computers had analyzed every aspect of the human ship's performance, and the conclusions were clear. Nothing in the hegemony arsenal could harm this new form of enemy. "Communications, open a private channel to the human captain," he ordered quietly. "Channel open, War Prime," his communications officer replied. "Captain Kim," Thokran said, his voice lacking its earlier arrogance, "I must understand what I am facing. What have you become?" Kim's response came immediately, his tone patient and educational rather than mocking. "We are still human, War Prime. We have simply learned to exist beyond the limitations of flesh and bone." "But how? How is such a thing possible?" There was a pause before Kim answered. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of profound change. "For years, our scientists studied the problem of consciousness. We learned that what makes us who we are, our thoughts, memories, and personalities, are patterns of energy in our brains. We discovered how to preserve those patterns and transfer them to quantum matrices that can exist in multiple dimensions. Why would you do such a thing?" Thokran asked. "Because we were faced with extinction," came a new voice. This one belonged to Dr. Choi Yunji, speaking from within the ship's consciousness matrix. When the Galactic Council threatened to destroy humanity, we had to choose between death and evolution. We chose evolution. From her position within the quantum matrix, Dr. Choi could perceive the battle in ways that no physical being could understand. She existed as pure thought and energy, connected to every system of the ship and to every other member of the crew who had made the same transition. The process was not easy, she continued. We had to volunteer, knowing that we would never again exist in physical form, but we also knew that by making this sacrifice, we could protect all of humanity. Admiral Lee Kyung-min's voice joined the conversation from his position, monitoring the battle from long range. His consciousness had been uploaded to a quantum network that connected multiple human ships throughout the galaxy. This is not just about one battle, the Admiral explained. This is about showing the galaxy that there are alternatives to endless conflict. When you can exist as pure consciousness, the things that species fight over, territory, resources, physical dominance, become meaningless. War Prime Thokran struggled to understand what he was hearing. You sacrificed your physical existence to become weapons? No, Kim replied firmly. We became something beyond weapons. We became proof that evolution does not have to mean becoming better at destroying others. It can mean transcending the need for destruction entirely. Throughout the watching fleet, alien commanders were having emergency meetings with their science, officers, and military advisors. The implications of what they were witnessing went far beyond a simple combat trial. On the council ship, Counselor Crixnall spoke urgently with his own experts. If the humans can achieve this level of consciousness, transfer, what does it mean for the rest of us? It means, Counselor, that they have found a way to live forever while maintaining the ability to interact with the physical world, his science advisor replied. They have solved the ultimate problem that every species faces, the fear of death. But at what cost? They are no longer truly alive in any sense we understand. Are they not? They still think, feel, and make decisions. They still care about their species and their future. Perhaps being alive does not require having a body made of flesh. The conversation in the combat zone continued, with more human voices joining from within the ship's consciousness matrix. Colonel Park Hyun-woo, the military strategist, explained the tactical advantages of their new form. We can process information at the speed of light, he said. We can coordinate perfectly because we share a quantum connection. We can repair damage instantly by restructuring our energy patterns, and if one of us is destroyed, our consciousness patterns can be recreated from quantum backups. Engineering specialist Song Yuna added her own perspective. The ship itself is now an extension of our bodies. We control gravity, manipulate matter at the atomic level, and exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We are not limited by the physical laws that constrain normal matter. War Prime Thokran felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of his bridge. You are saying that you are immortal? In a sense, yes, Kim replied. But immortality without purpose is meaningless. Our purpose is to protect humanity and to show other species that there is a better way to exist in this galaxy. What way is that? Cooperation instead of domination. Understanding instead of fear. Evolution instead of stagnation. The implications of the human achievement were beginning to dawn on observers throughout the fleet. If consciousness could be preserved and transferred, then death itself might become optional for any species willing to make the transition. But not everyone saw this as a positive development. On the Hegemony command ship, Zulkar was already thinking about the threat this technology posed to the existing order. If other species learn to do what the humans have done, then military power becomes meaningless, he said to his advisors. Our entire civilization is based on the threat of force. What happens when force becomes useless? His political advisor nodded grimly. Revolution, Commander. Every species that has been kept in line by our military might would suddenly have access to technology that makes our weapons obsolete. Meanwhile, on the ship belonging to the Peaceful Syndicate, Keelan was having very different thoughts. Captain Vexra, this could be the beginning of a new age for all intelligent life. Imagine a galaxy where death is optional, where consciousness can be shared and preserved, where the barriers between species become meaningless. Or it could be the end of everything we consider natural and proper. Captain Vexra replied. These humans have become something that is neither alive nor dead, neither individual nor collective. How can we relate to beings who exist in ways we cannot comprehend? In the combat zone, the demonstration was reaching its conclusion. The Perseverance had shown capabilities that redefined what was possible in space combat. But more importantly, it had shown that humanity had found a way to transcend the limitations that had defined intelligent life throughout galactic history. War Prime Thokran, Kim said formally. We have shown you what we are and what we can do. The question now is whether you choose to continue this fight, knowing that it cannot be won through conventional means. Thokran looked around his bridge at his crew. These beings had served with him for years, sharing dangers and victories. They were still flesh and blood, still mortal, still bound by the limitations that the humans had learned to overcome. For the first time in his career, the greatest warrior of the hegemony had to make a choice that was not about victory or defeat. It was about acknowledging that the very nature of existence had changed forever. War Prime Thokran stood in silence on his bridge, staring at the human ship that floated peacefully before him. Everything he had learned about warfare, everything he believed about strength and power, had been challenged in the space of an hour. But Thokran had not become the hegemony's greatest champion by accepting defeat easily. If conventional weapons could not harm these transformed humans, then he would have to change the rules of engagement. Communications. Open a channel. To Fleet Commander Zulkar, he ordered. Channel open, War Prime. Commander, I formally request military assistance. This enemy cannot be defeated by a single ship. There was a pause before Zulkar's voice came back, sounding surprised. War Prime, the terms of combat specifically stated single ship engagement. The terms assumed we would be fighting a normal enemy, Thokran replied harshly. These humans have violated every natural law. They are no longer a ship and crew. They are some kind of collective consciousness wearing the disguise of a vessel. This is not single combat anymore. From the Perseverance, Captain Kim's voice cut into the communication. War Prime? Are you requesting that your fleet break the agreed terms of our trial? I am requesting that we face this threat with appropriate force. Thokran shot back. You are not what you claim to be. This is deception. Kim's response was calm but firm. We are exactly what we claim to be, humanity's champion. We never said we would conform to your expectations of what a champion should look like. Fleet Commander Zulkar found himself in an impossible position. The trial had been witnessed by representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Breaking the agreed terms would damage the hegemony's reputation for honor. But allowing this human consciousness entity to claim victory would undermine everything the hegemony represented. War Prime, Zulkar said slowly. You are authorized to use any means necessary to achieve victory. Throughout the alien fleet, commanders reacted with shock and anger. This was not what they had agreed to witness. The hegemony was about to turn a formal trial into a military assault. On the Syndicate ship, Captain Vexra immediately opened communications to the other observation vessels. This is a violation of galactic law. We came here to witness single combat, not a massacre, but Zulkar had already made his decision. All hegemony vessels move to combat positions. We are dealing with a threat to galactic stability. Dozens of massive warships began advancing toward the combat zone, their weapons charged with energy that could sterilize planets. Missile tubes loaded with warheads designed to crack moons. The combined firepower approaching the Perseverance was enough to destroy entire star systems. Inside the quantum consciousness matrix of the human ship, the crew held a discussion that took place at the speed of thought. They are bringing everything they have, observed Colonel Park Hyun-woo, analyzing the tactical situation instantly. Expected, replied Captain Kim. They cannot allow us to succeed, because our success would mean the end of their dominance. Dr. Choi Yeonji's consciousness sparkled with concern. Captain, even with our capabilities, we cannot withstand the combined firepower of an entire fleet. We may need to consider retreat. No, Kim said firmly. Retreat now would prove to the galaxy that our evolution has limits. We came here to show them what humanity can become. Let us show them everything. Engineer Park So-young's energy patterns brightened with excitement. "Captain, we still have not demonstrated our full capabilities. Perhaps it is time for the final protocol." Kim considered this for a moment that lasted microseconds in the physical world, but felt like hours within the quantum matrix. The final protocol was the most advanced aspect of their consciousness transfer technology. It had been tested in simulation but never in actual combat. "All crew prepare for collective expansion," Kim announced. Throughout the matrix, the consciousness, patterns of the crew began to resonate in harmony. Their individual personalities remained distinct, but their capabilities merged into something greater than the sum of their parts. The Perseverance began to change once again. This time, instead of simply multiplying, the ship began to grow. Its hull stretched and expanded, taking on new configurations that defied conventional ship design. What had been a simple cargo vessel was transforming into something that looked more like a living organism than a machine. "Weapons fire!" commanded Zulkar from his position. The hegemony fleet unleashed everything they had. Energy beams that could burn through stellar matter lanced out toward the expanding human vessel. Missiles carrying antimatter warheads streaked through space on pillars of fire. The combined assault was powerful enough to destroy a small moon. But as the weapons reached their target, something extraordinary happened. The Perseverance absorbed the incoming fire. The energy beams were pulled into the ship's expanding hull and converted into additional power for its systems. The missiles were caught in fields of distorted space-time and harmlessly disintegrated. "Impossible!" Thokran roared. "Nothing can absorb that much energy." The human ship continued to grow, its hull now stretching across several kilometers. New sections appeared as the consciousness within it expanded its physical manifestation. What had been a single vessel was becoming something that resembled a small space station. From within the quantum matrix, Admiral Lee Kyung-min's voice reached out across the galaxy to hidden human positions. "All units begin quantum emergence." Throughout the local star system, space began to ripple as more human vessels emerged from dimensional hiding places. But these were not the same kind of ships that other species used. Each one was a unique expression of human consciousness freed from the constraints of traditional physics. Some looked like flowing ribbons of energy that moved like living creatures. Others appeared as geometric patterns that shifted and changed as they traveled. A few took forms that hurt to look at directly, existing partially in dimensions that normal matter could not perceive. "How many ships do they have?" demanded Zulkar. His sensor operator's voice shook as he delivered the report. "Commander, I am reading over 50 contacts, but they are unlike anything in our databases. Some appear to be single ships, others seem to be collective entities made up of multiple consciousness patterns." The truth was both simpler and more complex than the aliens could understand. Humanity had sent not just the crew of the Perseverance, but volunteers from across their entire civilization. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, artists, philosophers, all had chosen to upload their consciousness to quantum matrices rather than risk the extinction of their species. Dr. Choi Eun-ji's voice reached out to the expanding fleet of consciousness-driven vessels. "All units, maintain peaceful posture. We are here to demonstrate, not to destroy." The human fleet took positions around the hegemony forces, but they made no aggressive moves. Instead, they began to demonstrate capabilities that redefined what was possible in space. Ships passed through each other without collision, their matter existing in different dimensional phases. Vessels the size of fighters suddenly expanded, to become larger than dreadnoughts, then contracted back to their original size. Some ships seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, creating patterns of light and energy that were beautiful and terrifying. Colonel Park Hyun-woo coordinated the display from his position in the collective consciousness. Pattern 7, show them gravitational manipulation. One of the human vessels, a flowing ribbon of energy piloted by the consciousness of a former physicist named Dr. Lee Sung-min, began to demonstrate control over gravity itself. Asteroids in the surrounding field began to move in complex orbits around the ship, creating a three-dimensional sculpture of stone and ice. Pattern 12, demonstrate matter conversion, Park continued. Another vessel, controlled by engineer Song Yuna's consciousness, reached out with fields of energy and began converting space debris into new materials. Metallic asteroids became crystalline structures that sang with harmonic vibrations. Ice became clouds of luminous gas that painted aurora across the darkness. Engineering specialist Namji Wu, whose consciousness had been uploaded during the final preparation phase, took control of a ship that looked like a flower made of light. She demonstrated the ability to create new matter from pure energy, building temporary structures in space that existed for minutes before dissolving back into their component particles. The hegemony fleet found itself surrounded by beings that operated according to rules they did not understand. Their weapons, designed to destroy matter, were useless against enemies that could exist as pure energy. Their tactics, based on physical movement and positioning, meant nothing against opponents who could be in multiple places at once. Sir, Thokran's tactical officer said quietly, "Recommend immediate withdrawal. We cannot fight this." But Zulkar was not ready to admit defeat. "All ships, focus fire on the largest human vessel. Coordinate targeting." The hegemony fleet concentrated, their assault on the expanded Perseverance, now grown to the size of a small city. But instead of trying to avoid the incoming fire, the human vessel did something that made every alien observer question their understanding of reality. It reached out with tendrils of energy and gently touched each attacking ship. Suddenly, throughout the hegemony fleet, alien crew members found themselves experiencing something impossible. For brief, 3 days after the battle that was not truly a battle, the Galactic Council convened in emergency session. The Great Hall that had witnessed humanity's ultimatum now hosted a very different kind of gathering. Ambassador Lee Dong-woo sat once again at the human section, but he was no longer alone. Beside him sat Captain Kim Jae-ho, who had returned to physical form for this historic meeting. The process of downloading consciousness from the quantum matrix back into a cloned body was still new, but it allowed the uploaded humans to interact with physical beings when necessary. The hall buzzed with nervous conversation in dozens of languages. Representatives from species that had rarely spoken to each other were now engaged in intense discussions about the implications of what they had witnessed. At the center of the hall, Vexitar stood to address the assembly. But the arrogant leader who had issued humanity's ultimatum was gone. In his place stood a being who had experienced, however briefly, what existence could be like beyond the limitations of physical form. "Fellow counselors," Vexitar began, his voice lacking its former commanding tone. "We are gathered here to discuss the results of the trial by combat between humanity and the hegemony." A murmur ran through the assembly. Everyone present knew that the trial had ended in a way no one had expected. "War Prime Thokran," Vexitar continued, "please give your official report." The great warrior stepped forward, his massive frame somehow seeming smaller than before. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its usual boastfulness. "Honored counselors, I must report that the trial ended without a clear victor. The human champion demonstrated capabilities that rendered conventional combat meaningless. No weapons in our arsenal could harm their vessel, and they showed no desire to destroy ours. Are you saying you were defeated?" asked a delegate from the mining guild, his tentacles writhing with confusion. Thokran considered the question carefully. "I am saying that the concept of defeat became irrelevant. How do you defeat an enemy that exists beyond the reach of your weapons? How do you claim victory over beings who could destroy you but choose instead to show you mercy?" Elder Council member Zefka, the oldest being in the chamber, spoke in a voice like wind through ancient trees. "Perhaps the real question is not who won or lost, but what we have learned about the nature of existence itself." Captain Kim stood to address the assembly. His physical body was young and strong, but his eyes held the depth of someone who had experienced consciousness beyond normal limits. "Honored counselors, humanity did not come here to prove our superiority. We came to demonstrate that there are alternatives to the endless cycle of conflict that has defined galactic politics for millennia." "What kind of alternatives?" asked Counselor Crixenall, leaning forward with genuine interest. "Evolution instead of domination," Kim replied. "Transcendence instead of conquest. When consciousness can exist independently of physical form, the things that species fight over become less important than the things they can create together." Dr. Choi Eun-ji materialized beside Kim, her consciousness temporarily inhabiting a holographic projection system. "The technology we have developed is not a weapon. It is a tool for growth. Any species can learn to upload their consciousness, to exist in multiple states simultaneously, to transcend the fear of death that drives so much conflict. A delegate from the warrior caste of the Talon Empire stood abruptly. You speak of transcending death, but what have you really accomplished? You have abandoned your humanity to become something else entirely. Kim smiled gently. Have we? I still remember my childhood on Earth. I still feel love for my family and my species. I still experience wonder when I look at the stars. The only thing I have lost is the fear that all of these things could be taken away from me by death or violence. Throughout the hall, delegates struggled with the implications of what humanity had achieved. Some saw it as the ultimate evolution of intelligent life. Others viewed it as an abandonment of everything that made existence meaningful. Science Officer Keelan, representing the Syndicate, had been given permission to address the Council. Honored members, my analysis of the human technology shows that it could revolutionize every aspect of galactic civilization. Disease, aging, resource scarcity, even the limitations of physics, all of these could become problems of the past. And what would be the cost? Demanded Admiral Yexmore of the Hegemony military. If consciousness can be uploaded and downloaded at will, what meaning does individual identity have? If death becomes optional, what value does life retain, Captain? Kim considered the question seriously. These are valid concerns, Admiral. But consider this. When you no longer fear death, you are free to focus on what truly matters: growth, learning, creation, and connection with others. When your consciousness can expand beyond the limits of a single brain, you can understand the universe in ways that were previously impossible. Ambassador Li Dongwu stood to address a more practical concern. The Council must also consider the immediate implications for galactic security. Humanity has not developed this technology to threaten other species, but the demonstration showed that conventional military force is now obsolete against us. Are you threatening us? Vextar asked, though his tone suggested curiosity rather than anger. No, Li replied firmly. We are offering partnership. The quantum consciousness technology can be shared with any species that wishes to explore this path of evolution. But we will also respect the choice of those who prefer to remain in physical form. Elder Zefka spoke again, her ancient voice carrying the weight of centuries. In my long life, I have seen many technological advances that promise to change everything. Most prove to be temporary improvements rather than fundamental transformations. How do we know this is different? Dr. Choi's holographic form shimmered as she responded. Because this technology addresses the most fundamental limitation of all intelligent life, mortality. Every other advancement, no matter how impressive, still left beings vulnerable to death, disease, and the gradual decay of their physical forms. We have moved beyond those limitations. But at what cost to your souls? Asked a spiritual leader from the Harmony Collective. If consciousness can be copied and transferred, are you still the same beings you were before? Or are you merely echoes of your former selves? Captain Kim paused before answering, accessing memories from both his physical past and his quantum present. I am still Kim Jae-ho. I still remember learning to fly my first ship, still feel pride in my service to humanity, still worry about the future of my species. But I am also more than I was before. I can perceive dimensions of reality that were hidden from my physical senses. I can think faster, understand more, and exist in ways that expand rather than limit my identity. The debate continued for hours, with delegates raising questions about philosophy, practical implementation, and the long-term consequences of humanity's evolutionary leap. Some species expressed interest in learning the technology for themselves. Others declared that they would never abandon their physical forms. Finally, Vextar called for order. The Council must make a decision about humanity's status in galactic affairs. The original ultimatum was based on concerns about human expansion and technological development. Those concerns have been significantly altered by recent events. Counselor Crixnall stood to make a formal proposal. I move that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and privileges accorded to member species. Furthermore, I propose that we establish a joint commission to study the implications of consciousness transfer technology for galactic civilization. Seconded, said Qilon immediately. A vote was called. One by one, species that had been prepared to support humanity's containment or destruction instead voted to welcome them as equals. Even some hegemony delegates, influenced by their brief experience of expanded consciousness, voted in favor of the proposal. The final count was overwhelming, 847 votes in favor, 23 against, with 156 abstentions. The motion passes, Vextar announced. Humanity is hereby granted full membership in the Galactic Council. Applause filled the hall, but it was not the usual polite acknowledgement of a political decision. It was the sound of beings recognizing that they had witnessed something truly historic. As the formal session ended, delegates gathered in small groups to continue their discussions. Many approached the human representatives with questions about the consciousness transfer process. Others wanted to establish cultural exchange programs to better understand how uploaded minds experienced existence. Captain Kim found himself surrounded by scientists and philosophers eager to learn more about quantum consciousness, but one conversation stood out from the rest. War Prime Thokran approached the human captain, his massive frame moving with uncharacteristic humility. "Captain Kim," the alien warrior said quietly, "I have spent my entire life believing that strength came from the ability to destroy one's enemies. But you have shown me a different kind of strength, the power to transcend the need for enemies at all." Kim looked up at the towering alien who had tried to kill him just days before. "War Prime, strength comes in many forms. Physical courage, intellectual curiosity, emotional growth, spiritual transcendence. Your willingness to question your beliefs shows a different kind of bravery than Faki.